Okay, so in this first week, the real goal is to get you introduced to everything. Hopefully, you got a chance to watch how Git works, so you're familiar with that process. We're going to use it a little differently, meaning that it's baked into PyCharm, so you guys don't have to run the Git commands from the command line. But it's good to know those commands and how to reference those. So today, you guys should have got the letters from me for the GitHub Student Developer Pack. If you are a virtual student in another location and it gives you an error that you have to have a virtual letter, send me that. I'll send you a revised version of that has it. The JetBrains student, hopefully you guys got that all filled out so you can follow along with the video. That one's pretty easy. From there, when you get the JetBrains access and you go to even just JetBrains, the package we want to install is going to be developer tools, and you would want to grab Toolbox app. Okay. Once you get the Toolbox app, you'll sign in with the account that you created, and that will get you a box that looks like this in the lower right-hand side. We open up the box like that, and then from there, you can pick the different packages to install. And the main one you guys need is PyCharm Professional. Now, in this case, you can see that I need to do an update, etc. In this case, I also need to log in here, right? You don't need to install these other ones. This is for other stuff that I do. If you do need it, I'll tell you to install it, but you guys just need PyCharm Professional. Don't get that confused with the PyCharm community one down here. You guys actually want the full-blown professional one. Okay. Once you get PyCharm installed, I'm going to go ahead and fire up PyCharm here. And it takes a little bit to boot because there's a lot of stuff it requires. So now when mine fires up, it's going to look different than you guys because I switched to the old because I'm old. I need to get used to the new interface. You guys are welcome to use whichever interface. Just know that because I'm using the old interface, it may look a little different in there. And I'll show you guys how to switch to the old interface too, so you can follow in the videos. I promise this summer I'll work on it. That's all I can do. That's all I can guarantee. So let's wait for that to pop up. There we go. Now, obviously, you'll want the newer version that's out there in the toolbox. I'm not going to update mine on this because it'll take forever. When it first pops up, you'll see something like this window. And what this will do is have all your projects out in the middle there. You can load those projects. You may have none, right? It's brand new. So you will have the buttons up here in the upper right of new project, open, and get from VCS. All right. New project would be a great way for us to start off. Most of the homework assignments you're going to do in this class, we're actually going to create the project on GitHub. Then you will pull it down from GitHub. I found that doing that seems to work a whole lot better than you creating it on your machine and pushing it to GitHub to start. So I strongly encourage you to do the GitHub portion before you get to his side. When you actually open up, I'm just going to create a new project as an example here. Call it Python project. Just ignore this part. What I'm really wanting to get you to is the screen that will not look the same as what you have, which is going to look something like this one. All right. You are probably going to have a more sleek looking one. It actually looks more like Visual Basic Studio. They may have stolen that because it seemed to work. If yours is like that, you can come up here to the layouts and tell it to go down to the old one. There's a button usually up here in the upper right-hand corner that says go to the old layout. You can also go into your settings and tell it you want the old default layout. So if you do that, it'll match more of what you see on my screen when I go through there. Okay. Let's see, what else did I have in here? Because there's some stuff I wanted you guys to get familiar with. So we cover the Python. Obviously, you guys want to have Python installed before you do that portion of it. So if I go out to python.org, and I would want to download the latest version of whatever's in here. You may need older versions as you go through this class, meaning the latest version might not be the best version because some of your projects, you guys are going to use third-party packages that aren't supported by 3.12.5. So you may need to go back and install 3.9 or 3.8 or something like that. You can have multiple versions installed. That's not a problem. So for example, I have 3.11 installed, 3.12 installed. I sometimes have 3.9 because a lot of things are still supported on 3.9. right? To get those, you just scroll down here and literally grab the last one in that one. So if I needed 3.9, I would grab 3.9.19. If I needed 3.10, 3.10.14 kind of thing. Install those and you'll be good to go. Inside PyCharm, down here in the lower right-hand corner, you're going to see where it says no interpreter, right? When you click on no interpreter, you need to create an interpreter for every single one of your projects. What does that mean? It's creating an instance of Python for every single one of your projects. Now, people that know Python, this is called making a virtual environment. And the idea is everything that you do in that project is self-contained. So if I install a bunch of different modules in here for, say you guys are installing, 10 different pip installs for everything over here, and he has to install 10 different pip installs over here. Well, you don't want to install that to your main Python installation on your computer like we did in 360. So 360, we installed Paperclip. When you installed that, that was for system-wide, right? We only want to install for each project. So we create a new interpreter for every single project. So we would come up to add new interpreter, add local interpreter, and in this drop down a base interpreter, this is all the versions of Python you have installed on your system. For you guys, it should just be 3.12. All right. Once you click that, then at that point, we'll get into more detail when we do the first project for that. But that's the main thing. Install 3.12 for now, and then we'll set you up with a project and interpreter there. Other than that, did you guys have any issues getting PyCharm installed and all that? Okay. So we got the IDE, the PyCharm overview. I'm going to go ahead and just make this available. This was a video from previous year, but it's going to explain some of that more than what I just did here of here's the outlet, here's where we go do this, that kind of stuff. It'll make a whole lot more sense next week when we jump into project 1 or mini project 1. Actually, next week is a mini project 1. It's an API, but I'm going to show you guys how we start our code out there. Now, once you get a hold of your GitHub account and you're in there, obviously you go to github.com. You guys would sign in with your account once you're approved. And you would see something like this on your main screen, right? Over here on the left, this is where it would list all your projects that you have in your repository. You'll see I have a ton out there because of obviously teaching this class. Most of these are junk ones I need to go back and clean up, right? You guys would create your new repositories out here. Again, a repository is a block of all your extra code, and you can see it in there. If we come over here and look at some of these other projects, for example, this Proxmox Lab client, you can see that I have 2 files over here, and then I could click on these and kind of view and see what's all in there, right? You guys will be creating these from scratch as we go through there. So for example, when we start playing with the APIs next week, it would be good to start a new repo for that. So we would create a new repository. We need to give it a name. So it'd be something like API example 1, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. All right. It checks to see if it's available. It should be, unless you're renaming a project you already have. You would always want to make sure yours are public, not private. Otherwise, it's a pain for me to check them out. Okay. So make them to the public side. It says initialize this repository with a README. You want to go ahead and do that. That just sets up a template for you, and we'll show you how to change that. Down here below on the add get ignore, we want to go ahead and do that and go ahead and set it up for Python. Okay. The last piece here is choosing a license. Everything we do in here, we're not necessarily setting a license. When you guys write software, you typically have to choose what license you want this to be, right? If you choose to make this open source and anybody and everybody can have it, well, then you can choose some of the open source licenses like GNU3, MIT. All of these have different licensing nuances, whether or not they have to give you credit for your code or whether it's just pure open source and they can steal and modify and do whatever they want, right? Again, I don't have you set anything in this class because it's pretty much there. If you want to learn more about those, I do encourage you to click on this learn more and figure out what licenses you may want to run stuff at. And there's some nice tools out there that compare them all and all that stuff out there. Again, everything we're doing is just pure open source. We're not setting anything. The default branch is now called main, and that's what it's going to set up in yours. If you guys have been around GitHub a while, it used to be called master. They no longer call it that for reasons. I don't want to go into that in this class, but they now call it main on that side. All right. You click create repository. And now you can see I have two files in there. I have my git ignore and I have my readme. The readme just has the name of the project in it. And if we actually look at the code, it's just written up in what's called markup. So this is GitHub markdown. And when you put the pound sign in front of it, that basically leaves it as a header one. And we'll talk about markdown as a language and stuff like that here next week, especially when we get into our projects. All right. We have our git ignore file. What this does is when you guys do your projects, there are certain files you don't want to include in your repository, like all of your Python packages and everything else. Otherwise, your repository gets huge, right? So when somebody checks out your code, they should install the packages and everything else. We'll talk about how they do that. But there's other things like passwords and environment variables, things that you don't want people to have access to. For example, if we go back and look at that other repo I had, Professor Zeller, wherever those other projects went. Yeah, repos, there we go. And we look at this one for Proxmox Lab Client, and we look at the Docker Compose, there's things like there's the password written right in it, right? Now, obviously, this is a generic password. It's just a template, but you want to be careful not to include that. The number one thing most people do, include their API keys in here. So when we start talking about API keys next week, you do not want to commit your API key to GitHub. Usually, the second you do that, within 2 to 3 seconds, they invalidate your API key. There's actually a scanner going through GitHub all the time. And if they see you put your API key out there, they almost kill it immediately, every single time. That's a good thing, because what I don't want to do is put something, especially if you're paying a couple $100 for requests and everything, you don't want them running up a bill on you because somebody found your code and checked it out, right? So we'll show you how to protect your API keys, how to make sure they're not being committed, that kind of stuff inside there. All right. If I go back to that repo we were just at, down here at the bottom, that's not the right repo, API example 1. Okay, some other things to get around in GitHub that you would need to know. Your main code tab is where you'll do almost all your stuff, all right? When I go to the top here, you can see this is the URL on where to get to mine. So when I ask for you guys to post this later on, when you submit an assignment, you don't submit any files, you just submit this URL, all right? This is the URL I want to see, the one that says github.com, whatever your title is, and whatever the name of the project is. Sometimes it'll throw like -root and a bunch of other stuff on there. Make sure you're not including that. It should just be this very basic title up at the top. If you come over here to code and you see this code example here, the HTTPS one is the one that we'll use the most. Just click on this copy sign, and then you would be able to have access to that line. You could submit this one here for your homework assignment. I would prefer you do the one up here. Okay. This one, if I hit copy, then I come down here to my PyCharm and I close out of this project. I would come up here to get from VCS. VCS stands for version control system. There's lots of different kinds. There's Git, Subversion, Mercurial. There's a bunch of different ones out there. The only ones we care about is GitHub, right? That's what we're going to do all our stuff in. So in this URL, I go down here and hit Control V, and it will pull up the directory and where it's going to save it. By default, it's going to put it in your user directory, or sometimes it used to put it in a PyCharm projects folder. Just know wherever your projects are being saved. All right. I'm going to hit clone, and what that does is copy down from GitHub all the files associated with my repo and set up all the different files in order to do that. Now, mine's going to automatically do it. When you guys do it, it's going to prompt for your credentials for GitHub. Fill in your credentials so that it then stores it and has the ability to submit code and pull code down. And again, all this is being recorded, so in case you need to use it for reference later, you can go back. Once it does this, it'll take a little bit down here at the bottom. It'll crunch. It'll sometimes say indexing, etc. As you get more and more files, it has to keep track of everything in your code. These IDEs are way more powerful than the idle stuff you guys are used to using in the past, right? And in a good way, because it'll help you with autocompletes. It'll highlight when you have errors. It's going to color code things even more than what the original idle did. So using these more profound IDEs is going to help you a lot. Right? In the bottom, if we look down here, this one says Python 3.11 Hayland. That is not the interpreter we want to use for this API example project, right? That's for a totally different project. So I would come down here and have to click add new interpreter, add local interpreter, pick 3.12 and just hit OK. And what that's going to do is create a new virtual environment for this project. Now, if you guys are using Python in other ways, there's a command line way to do this. This is why I show you in the IDE, because it makes it really simple to do it. Plus, it's going to keep track of all the settings and automatically adjust things as needed. So when I do this down here at the bottom, you're going to see it's launching the skeleton generator and indexing everything to make sure it's got all the packages installed, etc. So it takes a little bit when it first creates it. You'll also want to come down here and look and notice that it says Python 3.12 API example 1. That matches my project name. We're good to go. If you don't do that check, you're going to get halfway through your project and be very frustrated as to why other packages are there. It's because you're working on a different project. So every single project we do, you want to make sure that that is correct in the lower right-hand side. You guys have any questions about that? 3.12 for now. You may need to revert back based on when you do your projects. Sometimes third-party modules don't have support for the latest and greatest, so you got to revert back. And by that, you just install 3.9, and then down here in the bottom, you change the interpreter to 3.9. Great question. Okay, so now that we're in this environment, the other thing you'll notice down here in the lower right is it says main, and it's going to be really hard for you guys to see. I will try to increase the resolution for the recording. This main means that we're on the main branch. In Git, you can have multiple branches as you work through your code. Most of what we'll use in this class is the main branch. If you were doing full-on production, you could have branches for every single feature or development, etc. So at minimum, you would have your main branch, which is the source of truth, so to speak. This is my main code. Then we would create a branch off of that, in which case we would call it development. That's where we add other files, or we're doing testing or something else. At the moment we want to commit that back over to the main branch, then you would do a merge and some other stuff. We'll talk about that. Most of the time in this class, we just deal with the main branch. All right. If you guys were going to come on, be full on programmers, you would start to want to use other branches. Okay. Once I make changes inside this over here on the left. So for example, again, I have two files. I have gitignore and I have my readme. The first one we want to change always is our gitignore. We're going to scroll down to the bottom and you're going to see PyCharm here. All right. That is because PyCharm creates a folder called .idea. And the dot means that it's a hidden file, but it's still going to commit it. We want to make sure we undo the comment for that so that it shows up in white. And then we want to make sure we save and commit this back. If you forget to do this, it saves all of your project settings out of the PyCharm environment out to your GitHub repo, which you don't want because it's going to save usernames, passwords, and a bunch of other stuff. So make sure the first thing you do when you create a new repo is come down here and undo that comment so that it doesn't submit your ideas. It's not your ideas, it's the settings for PyCharm. Now that we've made that change, we can go to the README. And again, in the README, I set in the class, in the very first, let's go back out here to learning modules. You would come down here to GitHub, mini projects, tips and tricks, and you have this README template, all right? So the first thing you would want to, again, do is just copy and paste this entire thing right into your README file. So replace that and dump that into here, okay? Again, this is using a language called Markdown. You can Google GitHub Markdown flavors, and it will tell you how to write these in here. So for example, if I was to save this, you can see that this would be as a header because it's using multiple hashtags. Down here, when I want to do a code block, it's going to use 3 ticks, then whatever code I want to execute, and then 3 ticks. Note that ticks are right next to the number 1 on your keyboard. Those are not apostrophes, those are tick marks. Right? So if you look at the number 1 on your keyboard, you're going to see the tilde and then a tick mark. You want the tick marks. Okay. Let's see. You can also have things like bullet points, in which case you would use asterisks for that. And then if you ever want to do links to code, which you would do down here at the bottom, you would put the name of that you want to call the link, and then you want to put the URL in the parentheses right after. So this is a template. You just fill it out is all you have to do. When you guys do your stuff, all I'm looking for out of this, and there's some of this that we don't necessarily have to have in here. If you use anybody else's code, inspiration, a link to whatever else, use ChatGPT, etc., put that down in the acknowledgments and you're covered. Think of it like citations when you're in grad school, right? You got to cite your code. Do the same thing here. You're covered. No issues. Okay. Let's see here. This is going to be a project file that everybody's going to read if they were to check out your code and tell them what your project is, how to run it, examples of how it runs, how to install it, all sorts of stuff like that. You guys will fill this out for all your own projects. Okay. For now, we're just going to save the template so that we have it. Note over here on the left-hand side, these went from white to blue. Okay. What blue means is this file needs to be committed up to GitHub. So right now, this is a file that's changed. I need to save those changes, so to speak. Okay. To do that, we click on Git up here at the top, and you would go to commit. Okay. When I click commit, it's going to pop up over here on the left-hand side of the commit. And this bottom part is where I put a comment as to what this commit is. You want to do commits very, very small. In other words, I'm changing one, maybe two files, then I'm going to do a commit. Then I'm going to make some more changes, then I'm going to do a commit. And the reason for that is you can revert back to these other versions. So if you remember Python 360, you were probably doing version 1 of a file, calling it literally version 1, then version 2, version 3, but you ended up with like 6 Python files at the end. This is just keeping the same file name, but it has multiple versions of the file name baked in. And that is a whole lot easier to deal with than Python version 1, Python version 2, et cetera, out there. All right. So this one, we would do our initial comment, and we would say changed git ignore to support PyCharm, and added the README template for the class. The more descriptive you are here, the more it's going to be meaningful to you later if you ever had to revert to that version. All right. So be descriptive in your commits. Now, I wouldn't write paragraphs, right? But you should have a list of stuff. Now, you could comment. The best way to do that is have a notepad open and just simply write what you made changes of, and then you can copy and paste that stuff into this commit when you're done. All right. When you're down here at the bottom, you always want to click commit and push. There's a commit and there's a commit and push. The difference between the two is commit will just commit the changes to the repo, but it does not commit it out to GitHub. All right. When you commit and push, it's going to commit it on your local system, then push it on out to GitHub. Be in the habit of always doing commit and push. All right. So if I commit and push, it's going to commit it, and you'll see committing down here at the bottom. It's going to pop up and say, are you ready to push these changes out to GitHub? We just click on push, and we'll wait for it to push it out to GitHub. Now, when you guys first do this, it may ask for the credentials again for GitHub. Once you put those in, it won't ask from there on out. All right. Like this, for example, it's now asking me for my credentials. Obviously, they expired. So I would say log in via GitHub. It's going to kick me over to a GitHub page. I'll say authorize. It says I'm authorized. Now I can close it. I can go back to GitHub or back to here. And you'll notice it's trying to push, and it pushed the one commit out. Okay. If we go back to GitHub on our side, I get the right screen here. There we are. If I refresh this page, you'll see that I now have 2 commits. I have one that just committed a minute ago, and it says the changes that are in here. You can go in here and do a compare on those 2 commits to see what changed. So if I look at these commits, we can see what changed in those. In this one, the git ignore file, we remove the hashtag. In the README, everything's green, meaning that we subtract this. Red means that we took this line out. Green means we added all these new lines. right? So it's a nice way to see what changed between the two versions. For us, it just keeps the latest commit out here and tells us what we changed. Notice down here, the README changed so that now it's in a proper format and tells us what we should be doing. Notice that the little code block gives us a nice copy. So this is handy when you guys are going to tell them to do pip install, blah, blah, blah. You're going to have them just simply click copy and paste it in. Makes it a lot easier for the user. If you Google really good looking README templates for GitHub, they're going to give you some good ones. Use them. As long as it has the basics of what I wanted in here, which is this first part and the project title, and then some descriptions in here, you're fine. All right. And again, we'll walk you through what the first one looks like. From there on out, guess what? You just copy and paste it from every assignment. Fill in the new changes. Good to go. All right. A good looking one would look something like this, which is another project I worked on from another person. And so from here, it's going to give me a summary. What is this project? An introduction to what it is, what license, how to install it. It's going to give me the code I need to run in order to install this project. And then down below, they go one step further and actually do GIF images to show me what I should be typing in and what the results would look like. All right. You don't have to get this fancy, but if you want to, it's kind of nice for your end users. So if you were pushing product and code out for everybody, this is the kind of stuff that you would end up doing. The more detailed this README is, the much better off you are on your side. Okay. If you guys have ever used GitHub to go check out somebody else's code, which you guys will have to do in here, if the README is not very good, the code's probably not very good. All right. If they spent time and the README is easy to read, that's probably a valid project to pull down and use. And you guys will find that, right? Tons of people will write the exact same code. Some is good, some is bad. Another thing to look for is up here on the latest commit. See when the last time they committed on that project. All right. This one was just last week. If you get in here and find a project that's 13 years old, probably not going to work the way you want it to. All right. So I get students do that all the time. Hey, I found this project. I want to use this in my project, that kind of stuff, but it's 8 years old and I'm running into errors. This is because they haven't updated it in 8 years, kind of thing. And more than likely things are broke. So definitely when you guys go out and find stuff on GitHub, see when the last part is. So that is the quote unquote homework assignment for this week. Go out to GitHub, doesn't matter what you're doing, and just find somebody else's project. Do a Google search. You can go up here to search, find something, right? I don't care what you find it. So for example, here I was looking at this in business card. And what this does is it essentially creates a digital business card generator, right? So if I was to check out this code and run it in Docker in this case, or whatever it is, it would create a digital business card. So if I look at the view demo, here's the code running where I can actually create this little code, add a logo, add some other stuff. This is actually the web application that I could have checked out for my own for self-hosting. There's tons of projects out there on GitHub. All I'm looking for you to do is find a project like this, go to the code, hit the copy, and then go and check that into PyCharm as a new project. So come in here, you would close this one, check out from there, copy and paste the code in and clone it, see if you can follow their instructions and actually execute their code. Now you may have to do a bunch of things to make that work, right? Some projects are better than others, but practice doing that. And what you're going to find is if they didn't give you good text, you know that you should have wrote good text, because otherwise nobody can run your code as you go forward. The reason I have you guys do all of this in GitHub and write all these different texts out is if you guys are end up going to be coders in real life, you want this as a repository for you to show your future employers. And yes, future employers love seeing GitHub code. As a matter of fact, when I was out in industry, this was more important than any LinkedIn or anything else. We wanted to see their live coding examples. And if they pointed us out there where we could check out their code and they were comfortable publishing it, that told us a lot about how they write code. If they commented it a lot and they gave a lot of detail in their different files, yeah, that's the person we hired. If they didn't comment anything and they were very secretive about their code, nobody wants that in their industry, because if they write a bunch of code and then leave, ain't nobody ever going to be able to work on their code again, right? So it's a huge hiring thing. Even if you're not necessarily wanting to be a coder, maybe you're going into cybersecurity and the other stuff, having these projects available for them to go look at is a good thing. It will never hurt you on that side. I have yet to see an employer go, yeah, I saw that and said, nope, unless you weren't doing it well, right? So that's the reason we're going through the process of doing GitHub. There again was other version control systems like Subversion, Mercurial. Subversion's great, but it's really meant for one person and running your own repository on your own machine, right? GitHub was really meant for 20, 30, 40 people, 100 people working on the same project. So what they would do is they would go check out the main code, create a new branch, add a new feature, and do a merge request for them to push this into the main code. And this is how all the apps that you guys use in the world are all using something like this on the backside, right? They're not going in and editing the master. Does that work? No. They're basically taking a copy of it, making a new feature change, and that's how they usually do it, is by feature changes, so you can see this. And over time, if you go out to like Insights and even Forks, you can see forking means I'm going to take somebody's code, fork it off as a version of my own. All right. What that does is allow me to go pull different versions of it. I may like your project, but I want to tweak it and do something completely different on my own. Or I'm going to fix a bug in your project and I'll commit that up to you. All right. The difference there is I'm going to fix your stuff. I'm going to check out your code, fix it, submit it back to you for approval, and then you add it. If I want to just do a deviation of your code, I would use a fork. Okay. Code frequency charts and things like this. Really what this allows us to do as managers is to see how many times we added, deleted, who's the most active, that kind of stuff. The commit standards, what's your pace of commits. This gives you a ton of detailed data. For the purpose of this class, it doesn't really matter, right? I don't go look at this stuff. What I do care about is that you're using your commits in the right fashion, right? So you're doing lots of little commits. You'll see here for this project, there was 111 commits, right? It's nothing on really big projects to see thousands of commits. And that's great because there's 1,000 versions for you to go back and figure out where the bug was. If you have 2 commits, you have 2 versions to figure out where that bug was. And that is horrible. As many commits as possible, which brings us back into PyCharm. There was commit and there was commit and push. If you commit, that just commits to your local machine. If your laptop dies during the middle of the semester, it is not pushed out to GitHub and you lost all your code. All right. Do a commit and push so that there's always a version out there on GitHub. And that way, if something happens to your local machine, doesn't matter, or your environment gets all messed up, something. And trust me, it happens every single semester. Somebody blows up their IDE and can't figure out how to fix it. Doesn't matter. Trash your IDE, remove PyCharm and everything, start over from scratch, check it back out from GitHub, and you're back up and running. Okay? Trust me, every semester a laptop dies or they completely blow up PyCharm where they can't get it working anymore. Delete it all, reinstall, doesn't matter. You already pushed your code out if you're in the habit of it. The other beauty of that is if you push out and you say, hey man, I'm really having troubles getting this code to work, all I have to do is go to your GitHub, pull the request, and I have a version of your code. I don't have to have you zip it, email it to me, extract it. Nope. I just go out to your GitHub, pull the code down, check it out, and we're ready to go. So it's a lot faster for me to help you guys with your projects. Now, obviously, your README needs to be good, and you need to have all the requirements listed. We'll talk about that. Because if you don't have that, check out your code and run your project. So I know that's a lot of info. It is recorded. I know you look a little glazed over in the eyes right now. It's okay. I mostly say all this in this first video so you guys can go back and go, oh yeah, I forgot how to do that. Let's go look at the video. Anybody have any questions about PyCharm? What is Git? Why we're using Git? Okay. All right, let's go back out and see if there was anything I'm missing that was supposed to be covered in this first week. That's really the gist of it, is making sure you guys go get your GitHub pack, make sure you get a GitHub account. Even if you decide not to get the student developer pack, which for the most part, you're fine in this class. If you just have a GitHub, that's fine. Use that one. Get your JetBrains set up. That's really the big deal, is getting this all checked out in the first week and up and running, because next week we're hitting the ground running. Like, we got lots of stuff to cover. Practice creating an account on GitHub first. checking it out to your PyCharm, making some changes, pushing it back up to GitHub. That process that takes a little bit to get used to, but practice is perfect on that one. All right, you're going to get lots of practice with the mini projects, but you don't want to do it with your code that you've been working on for 14 hours. That's not the time you want to learn how to use it. Use it with the files that don't matter. You can always go back and trash these projects there and on here. Doesn't matter. And I'll be honest, that's where the biggest people struggle in that first week. Hey, somebody's online here. Hey, Jim. Good to always have one online. Perfect. Yeah, he's no worries. All right, like I said, here in this screen, if you guys aren't seeing exactly this, I believe in the upper right-hand corner, there is an option for you to go to the old view. And so you can do that, or somewhere in your settings, there's the theme that you can change that will get you back to that other view. If I click on appearance, there you go. So if you're on this new UI, then you're going to see something completely different. You can tell it to switch back to the old UI and you'd be fine. You're also welcome to use the new UI. It's going to look a lot more like Visual Basic Studio. You're more than happy to do it. All the features are there. They're probably just in different locations. Okay. Let's see. Anything else in this PyCharm environment? We'll get more into all the pieces that you would use in here. A couple of those, for example, let's load up that last project. Close this one. And let's load up the API example. And down here at the bottom, again, we can make sure our interpreter is set up for the API side, which it is. Over here, you'll see this commit changes. This is the project folder over here on the left. This is where you will store all your files over here on the left. Okay. So you click on this as your top root file. I could right click, add new, and I could do a Python file, name it. So we're going to call it main.py. And now I have a Python file. It's going to immediately ask you if you want to add this to your Git repository. If I click add, you'll notice it goes from red to blue. In this case, it's actually green. So red means that that file is not going to GitHub. Green means it's a new file that's going to be committed to GitHub. Make sense? Blue, does anybody remember blue? What does blue mean? We made changes. Yep. All right. I'm not going to quiz you on colors, but when you look over there and go, what's that one mean? That's what it means. Green is new. Blue means changed. Red means it's not being committed up to the repository. All right. That's handy because when I come up here and I go to Git and I go to commit, it's going to pull all the ones over here that you want to add. So in this case, it says changes. That means I got one file. It's because I added this new main.py file. Okay. Let's go to project. You may end up creating folders under here. This VNV folder, notice how this is kind of a gold color. That means it's being ignored. So GitHub will not commit this out to our project. If it's red, it means no, you haven't told me whether this is good or bad yet. If it's gold, it means you told me in the git ignore not to commit this file. And we can check that if we look at our git ignore. You can see this is a .vnv folder. It's right here. And that's the reason it's being gold up here. Okay. That is all the virtual environment files, AKA all of your Python files installed. We don't actually commit your entire Python files out to GitHub. We always tell the user to install those packages themselves. Why? Because your project would become massive, right? And you deal with that on your side. You don't want a gigabit, a 1 gig file. You don't want any of that kind of stuff. Project should be very, very small. It's just lines of code. Okay. Other things to know down here at the bottom, you have these little buttons or tabs down here. The Git is going to get you, obviously, your Git changes, and you can kind of see what's changed over time, etc. We don't use that one a whole lot, but it's a good reference. Python packages, this tells you what packages are installed in Python, right? So this will tell you right now, nothing's installed. So if I want to install a package, I can come in here in the search and say something like Paperclip. Right? I click on Paperclip. I can come over here and install the latest package if I want to. I can click install. I tell it what version I want, 1.9. And down here at the bottom, you'll see it's installing Paperclip so that I have that available in my virtual environment for just this project. And the reason is I'm working on like 10 projects at once, just like you guys will be, 4 projects at once. You want to make sure each one of them have their own environment and don't overlap. So once this paperclip package is installed, it will be associated with this environment, and we would see it listed over here on this side, which right now it's still installing the package. Okay. You could come down here and hit show, and it would tell you what it's doing and why it's taking so long, kind of thing. You can also click on to do. Now, to do, what that's going to do is look through your code. And you guys, I just mentioned this in the 360 class earlier today. You guys remember comments, right? So we put comments in our code. Used to be red in PyCharm or in idle. Here, they're just gray color. But if I do a gray color and say to do fix line 17, right? Notice how that turned yellow. Down here, I can click on to-dos and it's going to scan my code constantly and tell me all the to-dos I should have had. So it's a much better way of basically project management, that if you're good with doing your to-dos everywhere, you can always come back here and see what you were supposed to fix. You made a note for yourself, write in the code, it pulls out all those to-dos for you. Really, really handy when you get into big projects, especially by the time you get to the end projects, you're going to wish you had that in there. All right. Problems, it would tell you if there was any problems. In this case, like PEP 8 compliance, there's no new inline at the end of the file, etc. You'll also see that up here in the upper right, there's a weak warning, for example, in this one, saying I basically didn't have a new line at the end. All right. PEP 8 says that. This curly brace at the top saying, I don't know what that means or how to spell that. I can go in here and tell it how to spell it, typos, etc. It's going to give you all sorts of ways to fix and clean your code that you didn't have in idle. Spell check, etc. The last one you guys will use is this terminal down here at the bottom. I click terminal, and this gives me a prompt. All right. This is how I would start projects. This is how I would run the Python file. This is the way I would do a lot of stuff. So you want to use this terminal baked right into the IDE. All right. The key thing to look at is this start over here on the left. If I do not see .vnv at the start of this, that means I do not have the right interpreter over here. All right. That means I forgot to start the right Python environment. So if I ever open this shell and it doesn't say that, and you guys are pip installing, but the code's never executing, it's because the terminal isn't in the right virtual environment. Okay. That's the number one thing people run into when they start trying to execute their code. If that VNV symbol isn't at the front of this when you're doing terminal stuff, something happened. Something's broke. Okay.
So I don't have that on mine right now, but I have the Python down here installed.
Yeah, so if that's probably because you popped the terminal before that was in there. So to fix that, you click the X up here where it says local, right here at the top, click the X, and then go back and hit terminal, and it should reload it with the VNV over here on the left.
No, it just says PS.
And you do have a terminal listed down here in the lower right?
Yeah, Python 312 down here.
Just Python 312?
Yeah.
That's the problem, because that is not assigned to your project. That is the main computer's Python 312. So at that point is when you would click over here, add local or add new interpreter, add local interpreter, and create a new one for this environment. Good check, because that's exactly what that's doing, is saying, hey, you're running just the entire global computer. That causes a lot of problems. We don't want to do that. Again, if you pop this up, it doesn't say this, just click the X, pull back up a new terminal. It should fix it, as long as you have the right Python shell set over here. Now, I could also do my pip installs here, right? So I can do pip install paperclip. And it would go ahead and try to install paperclip the same. So I can do that from over here in Python packages, or I can do that over here in terminal. Now, obviously here, it's going to say it's already installed. And if I go look at my Python packages, we can see it's installed. This is just a GUI way to look at everything that's installed from the terminal. If we want to see everything that's pip installed, we type pip freeze. All right. That's going to show us all the packages and the very specific versions that we're running. So for example, we see paperclip equals 1.9.0. This pip freeze file is what's going to build what's called a requirements file. And you guys will learn this here next week. So we would do something like pip freeze greater than, which means send this to a file, and we're going to send it to requirements.txt. And this you will do for every single one of your Python projects in here. What that does is create a requirements file up here in the upper left. And if we were to look in there, we would see our paperclip output that was in there. All right. Note this is red, which means it's not going to commit it. So we need to right click on it, go down to Git, and add to the Git. At that point, it should become green because it's a new file. And that would save up to the repository. Then what we would do is put in our instructions and say, to get started in this project, run pip install -r requirements. That installs all the Python packages they need for our project. We're going to cover that in much more detail. This is just giving you the outlay of everything you're going to use in here. That is the one thing everybody forgets to do in their projects. Don't forget to do that. And most people will do it at the very beginning and then totally forget to do that before they submit their assignment. If they do that, I check out your code, run your project, it's going to immediately crash. And as you guys know, if your project crashes, grades don't work so well, right? No, normally I notice that and go, hey, submit me a new requirements file. But everybody forgets that in this class. So I'm trying to say it multiple times so people don't forget. All right. You guys have any questions or concerns about this? I know it's a lot, but it'll become second nature very fast because of the way we're going to be working with it.
So for GitHub, because I submitted the thing and it's like, it'll take 9 days or whatever to verify.
Shouldn't take that.
None of
Most
the
people already got their bag.
functionality is changed?
No.
Okay.
No, everything we're actually going to do next week, it will not hinder you if you don't have the student developer pack. If it fights you too long, I would say just go create a GitHub pack. Don't worry about the student developer pack. Really, the idea behind the student developer pack is as you guys are working on projects, you can go back to that package and go, oh yeah, they gave me free 200 hours of doing this. I don't have to pay for it, right? My whole goal is that you don't have to pay for any of your project stuff. So, cool. All right. At the end of whatever you do in here, if you have stuff that is green over here, commit. All right. So commit, tell it what you did differently. In this case, we added .py and added our requirements file. Notice it auto completes. I can hit tab and it will finish. That's why we love our IDEs. Lots of tab and auto complete. So we type that in, we hit our commit and push. Remember, always commit and push. And I fail because I get a to-do check in here. All right. What that's doing is saying, hey, you got a to-do. Do you want to do that before you commit and push? And we can come over here and we can say review whatever to-do was needed to be done, or we can say commit and push anyway. All right. And in this case, we want to commit and push because we'll fix that to-do later on. We push it. We look specifically for this here that says 2 files committed, and we should get another one that says pushed. Wait till you see this before you close your laptop and shut down for the day. All right. When you do is come back over here to project, make sure nothing's green, blue, red. I say that because I hate seeing you guys work on projects for hours on end and don't commit your changes and then your computer blows up. Like, please don't do that. Always push when you're done. It's like saving it to the cloud and it will always be a backup. And every semester somebody loses their code. It's actually heartbreaking because I've done it myself too many times, especially when you guys have spent hours working on code. All right. After that, you can hit close. Next time you load this up, it'll load right back into the same project. Anything else you guys need in week 1? All right. So what are we going to do next week? Just as a precursor, we are going to jump into our OOP review, which is just going to kind of show you guys, remember how object-oriented works, etc. I don't spend too much time on that. What we really start doing is playing with APIs. And there's a lot of cool APIs that we're going to be playing with. There's a couple different packages I'm going to introduce. One of them is called Python Faker. It is awesome. Every semester, everybody runs off and just plays with that for like 2 days. It's actually pretty cool. It's a cool package to play with. Nothing like generating entire identities complete with social security numbers, bank addresses, everything else. You can create your own fake person in here. It's pretty awesome. All right. And there's a lot of reason, especially as us as cybersecurity guys would use this data. And I'll show you that. There'll be some times where I ask you guys to go find data. If you're struggling finding data, I'll have you use Faker to generate the data for you. That way you don't have to go person 1, Sam, person 2, Elizabeth, no. Faker just generates 100 different people for you to go, okay, cool. So when you guys are building websites in this class, right, it takes a long time to populate it with a bunch of fake data, but you got to make it look good, not like lip ipsum type data on the website, right? You want something that actually looks right. Faker will take care of all that for us. It's really, really handy for that side. But I want you guys working with real data too. So lots of cool files that'll show up in there. And then we're going to get you ready with dealing with APIs. And we literally spend 2 weeks on APIs. And the best part of that is it's whatever you guys are interested in. So what's your favorite topic in the world? We're going to go find an API associated with that and see if we can suck down some information from it. So like I said, in the past, we've done betting, sports, stocks, NFL's game, whatever. Steam game data, whatever. All right. And there's some old videos out there that are great for that, but we'll get started on it. All right. That's the end of this.